was more.
Good evening, all.
Structure that was destroyed in that fire. And
Christina? Can you hear me? Are you there? Can anyone hear me? Hello? Okay, great. Thank you, Hannah. Thanks, Jesse. Okay. So Christina, it's 4:30. I didn't know if we're waiting for Dr. Negron.
Yeah, we are. I just realized that I was not muted here, but I was muted on my computer, so I wasn't hearing anything from anyone.
I was like,
I was
wow.
like, why are these thumbs up popping up? Got it. Yes, we're waiting for Dr. Negron.
Okay.
Hi, Christina. Hi, Kim.
Hi, Mario.
How are you?
Happy New Year. Good. How is everyone?
Happy New Year. Oh, we're okay. Rough start to the year, but that's okay.
Isn't it always? Whether it's September or January, it's always something.
Mhm. Hello, Shantae. Let's see you on.
I'll check with Yvette
Hey,
Bello.
Happy New Year.
Happy
Yeah,
New
Happy
Year.
New Year.
I'm excited to be meeting about math. I feel like the last time we met about math was with Dr. Narvaez. I remember being in the old conference room on
And 960? Or
yeah, yep.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah.
Are you excited, Mario?
Anytime we're talking math, it's exciting.
Okay, I just heard from board member Bello, and she won't be able to join us today. So as soon as Dr. Negron joins, I believe we can start.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so Hannah's heard from Dr. Negron that she's okay with me starting, so I'm happy to get us started.
Okay, so we could go ahead and start the meeting then. So welcome everyone to the Teaching and Learning Committee meeting for the Board of Education, Hartford Public Schools. My name is Kim Oliver. I am pitch hitting as chair for this meeting and helping to run the meeting today. Along with me is my colleague, Shantae Brody, who is also here in attendance. Ms. Yvette Bello was not able to make our meeting this evening. With that, we have only one agenda topic. It probably will be a pretty robust topic though, in terms of our math assessment. And so with that, Mario, I turn it over to you.
Okay, and I just see that Dr. Negron also just joined.
Hello, Dr. Negron. I don't know if you want to, we're beginning the meeting. I don't know if you want to say a few words before handing it over to Mario.
Sure, thank you so much. Apologize for being a few minutes late.
Problem.
No, just wanted to make sure that I share again that this is a continuation of the presentation that we were working on last month with our fall academic data. And last month, we went and presented our data as it related to literacy right? K through 12. And today we're going to be doing the same format, same process. So a lot of the graphs will be familiar to you, but of course, now through the lens of mathematics. And I do have our director of mathematics, Mario Carullo, with us tonight to give us, again, a thorough look at how we are doing in math. So again, Mario, thank you for being here today. I'm going to pass it over to you.
Okay, great. And this is my first teaching and learning committee meeting. So my understanding is that the slide deck was received in advance. So at any point, if you have notes or questions that you want to speak to, just let me know.
That's great. And just also acknowledging for the public, it's also in board docs if the public also wants a copy of the presentation. Thanks.
Okay, so we could go ahead and Christina, are you running the slides?
I turned over that lovely responsibility to Hannah. So
Okay.
Hannah will be.
All right, Hannah, we can start. We could probably, Dr. Negron, you want me to go through like the connection to the mission, vision, and all that, or do you want me to jump right into the math?
Mario, let me kind of voice these over and then I'll let you go through with the other piece. So again, just as we always do in teaching and learning, kind of grounding everything on our priorities, and wanted to put in front of all of us once again, the holistic look of our strategic operating plan. And of course, today we're going to be honing in inside of the teaching and learning priority, which is this blue segment that you see here. And of course, our work here is all geared towards making sure that we are preparing all of our students, right, to be ready for their next level of work, whatever that may be in terms of their post-secondary success. And if you can go to the next one. And I wanted also to highlight, to keep it front and center in terms of what are the goals that we are aiming for. So again, this was in front of you last month, but I want to highlight that today all our presentation is geared towards this major goal number 3, right, which is at least 27% of our grade 8 students meeting math proficiency as measured by SBAC, as well as number 4, which is looking at the average percentage of target achieved, and also as well as all of this work, whether it may be literacy or mathematics, all of the work in the teaching and learning is always geared towards that 4-year cohort graduation rate goal. So again, grounding us on where it is that we're going. Hannah, if we can go to the next one. And specifically here again, major goal, as we're looking at this academic year, right? Since we are looking at increasing proficiency to 27.3, we are going after that 10.6% increase in this academic year. So that is like the goal that we are chasing at this current moment. And Hannah, I think I'm ready. Yes, so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mario.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dr. Negron. So we're going to begin talking about K2. So kindergarten through 2nd grade mathematics is an area of passion for me, seeing that early literacy is so critical, and that oftentimes early numeracy kind of takes a backseat to early literacy. So right now with our K2 mathematics, we can see that 11% of our students are meeting grade level expectations, 49% of our students are approaching, and 41% of our students are not yet meeting grade level expectations. This is based off of our first performance task. So in kindergarten, 1st grade, and 2nd grade, instead of doing interim assessments that are done digitally, we do performance tasks that in kindergarten are very like one-to-one interview style. And in 1st and 2nd grade, there's kind of small group implementation. And sometimes you would be asking a student one-to-one questions, and some tasks can be done as a large group. Grade 1 is an area of concern for us this year. It's just seeing that last year our kindergartners had a very unique year to be learning mathematics and learning mathematics digitally. So we are hyper focused on looking at our grade 1 students to ensure that they are making up for the disrupted learning that occurred due to the pandemic last year, and that we thought would be in the past by now, but is not. Okay, so here we're looking at grades K through 2 by disaggregated by different subgroups. You'll notice that the trends are similar to what we'll see when we look at the grades 3 through 8 data, which is focused on our interims. So some of these slides we'll go through quickly, knowing that you've previewed them. We could go ahead and look at the proficiency levels for kindergarten, K2 overall, kindergarten, grade 1, and grade 2.
Mario, I'm just gonna interrupt real quick and say they haven't exactly previewed them because they were given today, so I don't think they really had a chance to really soak in information, just so you know.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I apologize. No worries. Okay, so we could talk grades 3 to 8. So slide 11. Okay, so grades 3 through 8. So this is where we have 10% of our students that are meeting grade level expectations, 22% are approaching, and 68% are not yet meeting grade level expectations. So let me just provide some background information on our interim assessments in grades 3 through 8. So the interim assessments are have released Smarter Balance items, or we use items from the interim assessment blocks that are released by the State Department of Ed in alignment with SBAC. So the questioning, the types of questions are all aligned to the Smarter Balance assessment. What we've done is we've done a correlation to determine how our students perform on interim assessments and what does that mean about how they will perform on the Smarter Balanced assessment. And we found a strong correlation between our interim assessments and our Smarter Balanced assessment. Our strongest correlation is after interim assessment 3 with the Smarter Balanced assessment. That's which makes sense. We have interim assessment 1, interim assessment 2, and interim assessment 3. Each assessment assesses content that students have learned thus far. So interim assessment 1, which began on October 4th, was only assessing the content that students learned from when school started to October 4th. So they're aligned with our scope and sequence. And then interim assessment 2, which begins on Monday, this coming Monday, January 10th, we'll be assessing all the content that students have learned from the start of the year until January 10th. So that's how those interim assessments work. And so what the interim assessments do with this correlation is it tells us like how likely are our students to be, what % of students are likely to be proficient on the Smarter Balance. So we use this data to gauge, are we working towards increasing achievement and on the Smarter Balance assessment. Okay, so when we look at all of our grades by subgroup, let me make sure. Okay, here we can see that overall we're seeing our most historically marginalized or underserved student groups, or students with disabilities and multilingual learners, experience the largest gaps in mathematics proficiency. This is consistent with what we saw in the K2. And there's significant variance in achievement exists between resident and non-resident students, as well as between white, Asian, and Black Hispanic subgroups.
Can I
Okay,
ask that previous slide, could you go back? So this is students who are not. Okay, I could see the description down. Okay, thank you.
And just to further clarify, so the blue would be a student scoring at a level 4. So those students, we would expect that % of students to score a level 4 in the Smarter Balance. The green, whether it be high or low, is a level 3. And then the approaching, which is that yellow orange, would be a level 2. And then a level 1 would be the 2 reds. Okay, so when we look at it by grade level, we see that grade 6 is a transitional year for most students, as many are attending a new school. And subsequently, we see that our grade 6 students have the lowest achievement in grades 3 through 8. That has been consistent with Smarter Balanced as well. When we see our students from grades 3, 4, 5, and then at grade 6, we drop, and then we start to increase again. So that transitional year is an area of concern for us. And as students progress from grades 3 to 6, proficiency levels green and blue decrease, but as students progress from grades 6 to 8, proficiency levels green and blue increase. Okay, and we can go right into the 9 through 12 data. So our high school data here that we're going to be talking about, as well as our interim assessments. So our students take interim assessments in Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Geometry and Data, and then they have a midterm and final for pre-calculus and college ready math. So based off of our IA1, so this is based off of Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry and Data, we had 12% of students meeting the benchmark. 14% of students are approaching grade level benchmarks, and 74% of students need to strengthen their performance as measured by Math Interim Assessment 1. And here we see that same conclusion that was consistent within K2 as well as grades 3 through 8, with the variance that exists between resident and non-resident students, as well as white, Asian, and Black Hispanic subgroups. The performance variance between each of these subgroups is widened in high school. In our most historically marginalized and underserved student groups, our students with disabilities and our multilingual learners experience the largest gaps in mathematical proficiency, and those gaps are widened from middle school to high school, especially for our multilingual learners. So when we look at by course, we could see that achievement increases as students progress from Algebra 1 in grade 9 to Algebra 2 in grade 10 to Geometry and Data in grade 11. However, students repeating courses continue to struggle. So what are we doing about this? Okay, so we have 3 core strategies. The fourth one is a broader strategy, but the first thing that's probably our largest focus this year is academic acceleration. So acceleration entails focusing on grade level work and ensuring students access to that work and offering support and connections to prior grade level learning as necessary to address unfinished learning in mathematics. So we're doing this in several ways. So within the PowerPoint, there are, in the notes section, there are links to certain things. So you can click those to follow along, but I'll kind of talk through some of them. So when we think about academic acceleration, the goal, like what we don't want to see is remediation. So what we don't want to see is that students missed a year, had disrupted, they didn't miss a year and a half, they had disrupted learning for a year and a half. And so now an 8th grade teacher is going to start teaching a unit of 6th and 7th grade math because the students may be missing those skills. That's what we don't want to see. What we want to see with acceleration, what that means is, like, we are going to be teaching the 8th grade content, but we're going to be cognizant of the fact that some of our students might be missing some of the prerequisite skills to access that content. So we're going to provide just-in-time support. So we're doing that in multiple ways. So there's things called on-ramps. So within the PowerPoint, there are scope and sequences, and within the scope and sequences, you can see that there are designated lessons that are topics that we know students historically needed support on before accessing the grade level content. So it's 2 or 3 lessons, sometimes 1 or 2 lessons that are activating prior knowledge prior to the start of a unit. In addition to those on-ramps, which is what we call them, we have readiness assessments. So the readiness assessments are assessing all of the content students should know from prior grades that's needed in order to engage with the grade level content. Once we have that data, we have a guidance for acceleration, which is an accompanying document that goes with it that says, if students are lacking in this specific skill, these are fluency practices and mini lessons that can be done with the student, either during their tier 1, which is their core instruction time, or during their tier 2, which is their intervention time, so that the students are ready when they need to access that prior knowledge for the grade level content. The third way that we are providing for academic acceleration is through our use of digital platforms. So the readiness assessments are proactively determining whether students have gaps so that teachers can proactively plan for how they're going to address those gaps in their instruction. Through the use of Zearn, especially in grades 3 through 8, we have a reactive approach as well that's going on at the same time, and both are necessary. So through Zearn, as students are accessing the grade level content, if students are struggling, what it does is it provides them a boost. So it says, okay, the student is struggling with this skill. Let me back up and teach a previous skill. When they're showing proficiency with that previous skill, I then bring them back to the grade level content. So we have both what we're calling reactive intervention within tier 1 and tier 2, as well as proactive through the use of the readiness assessments and the on-ramp lessons. The lesson on-ramps is what we're calling them. So that's all academic acceleration. That is our biggest priority right now, because there's a lot of skills that are involved in that. So when we talk, I'm kind of oversimplifying it, but the process of assessing students to diagnose their unfinished learning, truly identifying what it is that the students, what the unfinished learning that each of those students have, planning how are you then going to address that unfinished learning while keeping up with grade level content, because if we push off grade level content, all we're doing is widening gaps. That is the focus of our professional learning with our teachers. That's the focus of pretty much everything we're doing this year. The second strategy is around our—
Sorry, Mara, can I ask a question? So for strategy 1, is there only a set of students or of our student population that actually works well for? Because at one point, if you are struggling with previous learning, but it's, further away from where the actual on grade learning is that when you have to move to a different strategy? Because I guess what I'm thinking to myself is academic acceleration sounds amazing, but that suggests you're not so far away from the actual grade level content, or is that not correct?
So they stopped calling it remediation because it has the term remediation has a negative connotation, and they're calling it acceleration. But we're calling it academic acceleration to be consistent with the current literature out there about making up for lost learning during the pandemic. But it is directly aligned to even when the gaps are large. So thinking about in 3rd grade. So in 3rd grade, the curricular expectation is that students are able to solve word problems with lapse time. So a student starts playing the piano at 2:42 and ends playing the piano at 3:15. How long is the student playing the piano for? But we also recognize that telling time on a analog clock or even a traditional clock is a 2nd grade skill that comes at the end of 2nd grade. So a lot of teachers may have missed that learning, students may have missed that learning. And so what teachers are doing through our readiness assessment is it's first determining they're going to solve word problems with lapse time in 3rd grade. But in order to do that, first they need to be able to read a clock. So can they tell time on the clock? And that's what the readiness assessment would be assessing. And then what the teachers would be doing is planning either mini lessons or if it's individual groups, or utilizing their flex days. So in our scope and sequence, there are days designated as flex, which are for if the whole class needs a lesson on this prior grade level skill to incorporate it in. So it is meant to back up quite a few grade levels as well, not just the previous year's grade skill.
Yeah, that's helpful. And I think I have another question, but I think it's better if you go through the strategies first, because you may answer it as you're going along. So.
Okay, and I thought of one more example too that might connect there. So in 7th grade, students are solving angle problems with angles, and one might say, okay, they had disrupted learning in 5th and 6th grade, but the prior learning to the 7th grade standard is actually the 4th grade standard on supplementary and complementary angles. They don't use that vocabulary, but so the readiness assessment for that 7th grade unit on angles is actually assessing 4th grade content. So it's not just assessing, the previous grade, it's the content that's needed to access the grade level standard.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, so strategy number 2 is our integrative implementation. So this is what we are. So despite the challenges of the pandemic and, the challenges of teaching and, and if we're being honest, it's not the easiest time to teach. We still adhere to quality teaching and learning for our students, right? So regardless of the conditions, regardless of the challenges that people are facing in their personal lives, at home, at school, our job is to provide high quality teaching and learning, and high quality teaching and learning in mathematics we define as our Hartford Mathematics look fors. So I'm not sure, Hannah, if it's worthwhile clicking the link. So this just kind of goes through, so it talks about addressing unfinished learning there, but then it just goes through like our core tier 1 math curriculum and all the different components that are part of that. So it has our scope and sequence in there. So the use of Eureka Math. So Eureka Math instructional materials are our core content. Our implementation guides are additional resources that are developed to help. They're a professional learning resource for teachers that help teachers understand like what came first, where's the content going, as well as like unpacking the standards. So what is the grade level standard actually calling for? And then how is Zearn intended to be used? Within here, it also is our flow of the block. So 21-22 recommended flow of the block. So when we talk about like what should a 75-minute tier 1 math block look like this is all like explicitly laid out. What does planning for mathematics look like? Our readiness assessments, our topic assessments. So there's a lot involved in like core math, like your tier 1 mathematics. So when we talk about integrative implementation, it's supporting teachers with ensuring that all of these aspects of our core tier 1 program, which is our guaranteed curriculum to families and students, are still being adhered to and implemented regardless of the conditions that we're in. And if you scroll further down, you could get into our tier 2 programming. And again, so integrity of implementation, meaning that even our intervention in our tier 2 time is being implemented in the way that it is intended, despite the challenges. So that is our strategy 2. That's a very comprehensive document that I don't think I can go piece by piece there, but is available. Our strategy number 3 is really focused on understanding of student learning. So this connects not only to the readiness assessments, which are about determining whether students are ready for grade level content, but also within our grade level curriculum, how are students understanding the content? So the use of exit tickets to guide instruction, the use of topic assessments, and the use of interim assessments to monitor student understanding and then act on that student understanding. I think one thing that sometimes we become data rich, that we don't then use the data. So a big part of our professional learning with teachers as well is like, okay, you have all of this data. You have readiness data, you have topic assessment data, you have exit ticket, you have daily formative assessment data, you have interim assessment data, but then how are you developing an action plan and utilizing that data to drive your instruction? And then strategy 4 is mathematics coaching. So the district made an investment in coaching in mathematics, which is, so I'm in a doctorate program and it's on my doctorate work is on coaching. So I'm a big advocate of coaching. And so the research says that coaching is the only way that people improve their craft in teaching and learning. And so having our mathematics coaches hyper focused on building the capacity of our teachers to teach mathematics in the way that it is intended, I think is a big investment in the district and an investment definitely worthwhile. we have a lot more focus on active coaching. So I think like when people think of the traditional form of instructional coaching, we think of like observation and feedback. And that's definitely a learning routine. But there's much more effective ways to coach teachers. And we see that through micro modeling, co-planning, real-time coaching. And we really advocate for those active coaching practices that allow for teachers to change practices in the moment.
So I have a question. Sorry, Mario. So for these four strategies, is it that this is, you know, available to the teacher? I guess what I'm trying to get to is that these are almost basically, this is what's in your portfolio as a teacher to assist students. And it might be, you know, a mix of a couple of different strategies. It may be one versus another for a certain student based on, like you said, the data that's available, et cetera, et cetera. And is it the teacher themselves in the classroom who's determining what's the best strategy for that student?
Good question. So these are the strategies that we, as the math department, have identified for, to increase achievement in mathematics. So these are not necessarily the instructional strategies, right? So the instructional strategies that a teacher would implement to shift the way they're teaching a concept and or shift the way they're interacting with a student or how the student is learning the content, that really falls under our look-fors. So the Hartford Math look-fors, which is at the top of that document that Hannah shared earlier, that outlines what we call highly effective mathematics. And it speaks to activating prior knowledge. It speaks to using and connecting multiple representations. It speaks to discourse strategies. It speaks to common formative assessments. So if a student is not learning, what we're looking at is those look-fors and like what's missing, what teacher actions or student actions is missing that's preventing the student from learning the grade level content.
So this is another layer basically of strategies then in addition to those instructional, you know, strategies, it sounds like. Okay.
Hannah, would you mind pulling up the look-fors within that tier 1 document? Okay, so core action 1, just focus, coherence, and rigor. This is really about like the content is correct. So that the grade level content that the content of the lesson that's being implemented is aligned to the standards. The learning target is accurate. It's based off of prior knowledge. You know, depending on the language of a standard, the way instruction should look. So this is where the rigor falls in. So for example, if a standard is designed to develop understanding, then what we should see is a lot of pictorial models. We should see discussion versus a procedural standard, like students can fluently multiply. We would see procedural practice in that. So we'd see students using the standard algorithm. But if we skip over core action 1 and we go to core action 2, which is instructional practices, these are the strategies that we would want to see. So if we're noticing that students are not learning content in the way that we would want to see, we would start reflecting on is student thinking visible? So is there ways for students to show their thinking, for students to learn from other students' thinking? And the reason why that's so powerful and rich is that students learn a lot by their peers, not just from the teacher. And if you scroll down to mathematical practices, well, right above that, we have mathematical representations. So this is that teachers are using and connecting different representations. So, you know, if a student is struggling with the standard algorithm, is it being based off of a procedural understanding? So is there a place value chart or an area model? So like, what's the representation that a student can use that's going to help them connect to the standard algorithm, so that they're then able to access and perform, you know, the multiplication fluently using the standard algorithm, but they have a model, whether it be concrete or pictorial, that would support them through that. So this is what we look at when we notice that students are not learning in the way that they're intended. We're looking at these look fors. And this is what's defined as quality math instruction.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, and you can see accessibility there as well, as like, are the accessibility strategies being implemented? So just to, so those that have met with me before know that I'm long-winded, so cut me off at any time. So the look fors are directly aligned with the instructional vision. And so when we're doing our instructional vision walkthroughs, we're looking at the ones here. So when you're looking at these look fors, what is connected to our priorities? So the strategies that I talked about with the academic acceleration. So we're always looking for checking for understanding. We're always looking for cognitive engagement, so that students are actually doing the work of the lesson. It's not like a stand and deliver lesson. So those are directly related to that, and integrity is one of our look fors. That's something that we're looking for in the learning walks. So the learning walks are supporting these strategies as well, as we're able to collect evidence and data on if we're seeing our look fors evident. Okay, so we switch to the SAT suite of assessments. So in high school, we have our interim assessments. We have IA1, IA2, and IA3, as well as the SAT suite of assessments. So in 9th grade, they take the PSAT 8 and 9 in the fall and spring. Same with 10th grade and 11th grade. We could see on this slide here, the percent of students that have met the benchmark, are approaching it, or need to strengthen skills for each of the different fall administrations. We did see a significant dip in 9th grade, to be honest. In the past, we were at about 20% were green, and you could see we went down to 13%. And again, 9th grade being a transitional year, with a much larger dip than we would have expected. This is looking at the average scale score from grade 9 to grade 12. And the actions, so all of the actions that I spoke to previously are also our strategies for high school. I think what's additional to the 4 strategies that I named previously is our partnership with Khan Academy for official SAT practice. So all students have a official Khan Academy account that's linked to their College Board. And as part of our core curriculum, we allocate time for students to be accessing official SAT prep as part of their tier 1 and or tier 2 instruction. This is new for us, this district partnership. And what it does is it allows us to ensure that all students are accessing it. So it allows us to monitor the integrity of this aspect of our curriculum. And regarding action step number 2, so transition to algebra is a course that was intentionally developed to be taken simultaneously with Algebra 1. It follows its own curriculum, and what it does is it really looks at a lot of Algebra 1 concepts and like the foundation for those at a very like conceptual way. So transition to algebra in itself is not a new action step, but the fact that we now have what we're calling Algebra 2 Lab and Geometry and Data Lab, that is new for our district. So we have intervention at the high school level where students are receiving support in their math course during these lab classes. So a student who is identified as in need of intervention would be enrolled in Algebra 2 and Algebra 2 Lab. And in the Algebra 2 Lab, it's providing the student that targeted assistance based on how they're doing in Algebra 2.
I have a question. How would you know that? Is it some testing that's happening in 8th grade or?
So we use the Smarter Balance, the 8th grade Smarter Balance to look at placement criteria for 9th grade. So in 9th grade, very few schools have Algebra 1 lab. We mostly promote the transition to algebra coupled with Algebra 1. And then for Algebra 2 and Geometry and Data, we're looking at course grades as well as the interim assessments. The interim assessments are a big component. I'm going to drop into the chat a document, and then perhaps Hannah, you could open it and screen share.
Because I would be a little concerned if we're just using the SBAC data. Maybe more comfortable if we're using our interim assessments. But then I still wonder about the students that just don't test well. So like I'm assuming it would be too late probably if they're already in the classes because they've been identified, but it's clear that they should not receive intervention. So I'm just trying to figure out how that would show up.
Yeah, so I do want to preface just by saying that one of the things that we are, we have heard, there's always going to be the argument about if students are not strong test takers, and we don't want to use that as a single criteria, but a lot of our criteria that we utilize for placement of students. So in middle school, we have an accelerated pathway as well to get students into Algebra 1 in 8th grade. But we want to make sure that our criteria for placement has no subjective measures. So we do not look at homework completion. We do not look at habits of mind. So a lot of those, like I know when I was in school and being placement criteria, there was a lot of those things that kind of relied on subjectivity. So like how the teacher felt my habits of mind were, how the teacher felt my percent of homework was. So it is more reliant on test scores than those subjective measures. But to your point, does have the caveat of, if a student is not testing well. But nonetheless, when we are placing students into intervention or remediation, this document here, sorry, I was trying to scroll, is what we use that kind of explicitly outlines when a student should be placed in each different course. And so if we're looking here for entering grade 9, we're looking at the interim assessment as well as the SBAC. And if a student is demonstrating grade level proficiency on both of those assessments, then we know that we're not scheduling them for an intervention. If they're showing proficiency on one, so as you can see on the 3rd row here, so they're showing proficiency on the grade 8 IA2, so greater than 70%, but then scoring at a level 2 on SBAC, we're still saying that they don't need intervention. They would enroll only in Algebra 1.
And this is new as of when? Like how long have we been using this as a method of placement in 9th grade?
At least 3 years. I mean, it's updated every year because last year with the guidance from the State Department of Ed to reduce assessments, we usually use IA3 because we know that's the most accurate based on the correlations that we have. But last year we reduced the number of assessments, so we only had IA1 and IA2. But yeah, I would say at least 3 years, our guidance counselors have been utilizing this and working with the math coaches to ensure the appropriate placement of students. And don't get me wrong, we have definitely missed certain students because there's been times in October where somebody would reach out and say, the student is in this class, should they be in this class? So it's definitely not a perfect system, but the guidance has, for at least 3 years, the guidance has existed.
Okay, and one last question in regards to like placement. So we have some of our students that have access to higher level math classes, one of the schools being Renzulli, because I had to fight for, so if my daughter took geometry in 8th grade, so she was just given like you're taking this class and that class, but it didn't particularly fit And then I had to call the 8th grade math teacher, and she's like, no, we went further because it was only 3 students in a class. So but every student may not have that level of advocacy at home or from a sending school, still having that connection. So so my question really is, if you took geometry and it's on your transcript, are we not believing and accepting it was geometry? Because it's not like you didn't know she took geometry because it was on there, but you're saying, no, that probably was just like, now I want to say fake geometry, but just something they had them doing. No, it was real, because the teacher had been previously a high school math teacher. So she was like, no, we went further than I could because I had less students. So I'm just worrying at this point, are we saying if it shows up on a transcript, we're believing that the students really took the class? Because I know Annie Fisher STEM, they get some exposure to some maths that I'm thinking some 8th grades don't. So I'm wondering, like, just how that is going to play. Because other student that doesn't have advocacy just be like, well, they just put me in here, so I'm staying in here, and they really don't need to be in there. They need to be in a high. Okay, I'm good. That's my concern.
So there's, I want to touch on 2 things that you mentioned. So the previous, the first thing that I want to speak to is when a student took a course in middle school, is it being recognized at the high school level? And I'll credit Dr. Negron for the development of a very comprehensive program of studies that I think now addresses this and the issues that we had in the past. So right now, the way it is that if a student took Algebra 1 or geometry, whatever the course may be, in middle school in a Hartford public school, where we know the curriculum and the assessments that the students took, because students in Hartford who take Algebra 1 in 8th grade take the exact same assessments and use the same curriculum as 9th grade Algebra 1. Then whatever they got on their transcript as a course grade goes on their transcript as a transfer credit. If the student took one of those courses outside of Hartford, so if a student is joining us from, let's say, Manchester Public Schools, they're coming to HMTCA as a 9th grader, and they're saying that they took Algebra 1. We don't know what Algebra 1 at Manchester Middle School consisted of. So for those students that are coming from outside of Hartford, we have a mastery exam. So we're looking for them to show that they can show proficiency in that course before we're awarding them a credit, so that we know it was as rigorous as our district course. So that's the first thing about honoring the courses that students are coming with or say that they've taken, is that if it's now from a Hartford public school, so if you're going from Global to Buckley, and at Global you took Algebra 1, well, Global is a Hartford school. I know the curriculum that was used at Global. I know the assessments, and I know that if the student got a B in that course, that it's a B in our district Algebra 1. So we would honor that B on their transcript. I would say that got cleaned up. Dr. Negron, how long have you been with us? 4 years? So around
in
the
year
time
4, so Mario, you're right. I mean, it took a lot coming in. It took a lot of those conversations and doing a lot of cleanup after learning about all the things that were happening and we were experiencing. And that's where Mario and I kind of really discussed and put things in place. So I want to say now the work started immediately upon my arrival, right? So it's been developing more and more every year. And then of course, always onboarding, right? Or new school counselors, doing better when it comes to making sure that our transcripts, right, are all up and updated. So we're getting stronger and stronger in those practices.
And then related to the other, all of our high school courses now have a mastery exam. So a student at any point, could say that I'm bored in this class. I know this content already. I learned it in a different school. Maybe there is no evidence. There wasn't a transcript, or maybe the transcript came and it said Math 2 instead of Algebra 2 or whatnot. All of our high school courses now have a mastery exam that students can take at any time. We have 3 versions of them, and students can now show proficiency through taking a mastery exam at the beginning of the year, mid-year, at any point those assessments are available. And then, sometimes students will score close, and this is in that document that Hannah was just projecting, was just screen sharing earlier. If a student scores, like, let's say a 60% on a Algebra 2 mastery exam, they can then choose to go into like an Algebra 2 lab, which is non-credit bearing, and study, on just the skills. And the mastery exams will say, like, there's a learning target, like this is the skill, this is the question that assesses that skill. Up until they get to a 70%, and then they could say, okay, I want to take a 70% instead of sitting through the course. And if you scroll down, Hannah, it's towards the end of the document. Right, all this stuff here. Yeah, so all this about, if you scroll up, about the, so it's connected to if students needed, if they failed the course, then they can take a mastery-based credit recovery option as well. And this is also that, let's say a sophomore, if I give an example, this might be easier. So we take Algebra 2 in 10th grade. If a student fails Algebra 2 in 10th grade, we know that they need 4 credits to graduate high school in math. So if they retake Algebra 2 at their junior year, now they're stuck because they still need that 4th credit. So now what this is allowing is that they could do it through a mastery-based approach. So the Algebra 2, I may have failed the course, but now I can take a mastery exam. Let's say it shows I get a 50. These are all the skills that I have that I got correct. These are the skills I didn't do correct. I can go into an Algebra 2 lab, which is a non-credit bearing course, study the skills to the support of my certified math teacher who's teaching the Algebra 2 lab class. Let's say for 6 weeks, take the Algebra 2 master exam, and during that time, I've learned the skills that I showed I didn't have before. Now I've earned a credit through mastery, and now I have a mastery credit on my transcript instead of having to sit through an entire year of Algebra 2 again, because that student is now taking geometry and data at the same time to maintain their credits.
And I wanted to add that this is the same approach that we utilize when it comes to the summertime and we're doing credit recovery, right? Instead of having the student go through everything again, we begin by doing that mastery approach.
Ms. Brody, did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so, sorry, I have several tabs now open. I lost where we were. Okay, I think, was that the last slide?
Yes, Mario, for you it is. I have this last slide. So similar again to when we met for the literacy component, and I had the hidden slide, but then the question came up and I was able to show you, and I heard you loud and clear that you really appreciated that slide. We have done the same thing here to kind of illustrate for you what are some of the investments that we are making right now, and many, right, with you that you have supported through your board approvals that are directly linked to making all of this work possible as it relates to mathematics. So I'm so glad that Mario went into a level of depth around everything that really requires, right, to have the art of teaching mathematics. And in order to bring that rigor, right, everything that requires as it relates to the way that it's supposed to be taught, right, with fidelity. A lot of that often, right, for a teacher, like you need somebody like kind of helping you through that process and coaching you. So that is a lot of what this contract through ANET is allowing us to do, right? So a lot of the support comes here, direct support that ANET is also providing to our own coaches so that they can then continue to increase their capacity when then they're supporting a classroom teacher. Also the direct support that is going to our building leaders so that they know, hey, when you go into a math class, what should it look like? What should you be looking for? So again, all of that plays out in this ANET contract. Mario also mentioned to you, right, some of the work that began this year as it relates to College Board. And that was a new partnership that we began. Before, we just had usually the free services that come sometimes through College Board, but now, right, we have this district license that really allows us to do more and access the data to really interpret where are the kids and what are the areas that we need to continue to hone in to really get them to continue to improve in that SAT, right, that they're going to take their junior year. Also, the investment right now, right, that we have made on intercession. So right next month, it's our first intercession. And that whole intercession in February will be dedicated to math. That will be 4 weeks of math focus for that intercession. So again, I wanted to lift that investment that's making all of this possible. The high dosage tutoring, right, that is also happening. That is also supporting work related to mathematics. And Mario also mentioned as part of our Tier 1 curriculum, how we do utilize Zearn. And that is also a district license for that software and an investment, right, that we brought in when we were just jumping into the pandemic. And now we have integrated that to be part of our entire kind of suite of materials, right, that we have in our curriculum. So again, I wanted to have an opportunity to kind of intentionally like call these out because they do have a direct link in our ability to continue to do the work that we're doing in math. I also wanted to take a moment because I know in one of the strategies that Mario mentioned, he talked a lot about our instructional walkthroughs, right? You heard me talk about those previously. All of the work and the energy that is going into those. The professional learning strategies, right, that we have discussed before. The investment in our coaching, right, and all of that becomes key. I also want to say that, right, we are continuing to do all that work, but we do have to be cognizant that this has been a very challenging year. Like one perfect example that I want to name is the space that we're finding ourselves now, right? With this, we continue to have the challenges around, staffing. More so now, particularly this week, right? With the high rates of, COVID cases that are happening. So sometimes some of these strategies, like we have to pause. We have no other way than to like have to pause. So for example, this week, there's absolutely no coaching going on, none, because we had to pretty much say all hands on deck to support with classroom vacancies. So every single one of our coaches this week has been deployed to go and fill different classrooms throughout the entire district. Also this week, right, in our professional learning, we were scheduled to bring in, for example, all of the coaches to begin professional learning with ANET. We had to say, no, we can't do it this week because we need, again, right now the urgency is to cover classrooms. Next week, we were supposed to finish 9 of the instructional walks, right, that had to be postponed from the second round. And like right now, I'm a little worried. Am I going to be able to continue with the plan next week for those 9 additional instructional rounds? We might have to pause because of what's happening on the ground. So yes, we will continue, like Mario said, we want high quality teaching and learning going on every single day. And that is why I want to credit Mario for his leadership in terms of all of the amazing resources that have been built over the years, so that there's a lot of guidance, right, to our teachers. But like he said, it's we all know it's a challenging year, right? So we're gonna have to just continue as we keep an eye on the strategies that are laid out in our strategic operating plan, often to do like some step backs and say, okay, what do we keep on track? What do we pause for the moment? Luckily, we haven't had to abandon anything yet. But I just wanted to name, we have had to do some slight pauses because of the realities right now.
So I guess a question I have is, with those realities, which likely are going to continue, and I was thinking earlier about something that Mario shared, which was there's all this data, right, that our teachers has available to them. But I'm also thinking about the time it takes for those teachers to be able to go through that data to create plans. And I think you made a great point, Dr. Negron, about this week, the where we are right now, right, in terms of the world we're living in, and teachers having to cover for each other. And in some cases, it's been happening for some time, right? And this just happens to bring a new level of intensity we're dealing with based on this latest surge. So when you take those step backs, and you're thinking about that overall goal, I think of like the movement of like, was it like the 10% or so, right? I mean, do we need to either like accelerate in terms of certain strategies? Maybe that's not a good word to use, since the word accelerate is being used a lot. Or is it that we have to, what I really hope is not the case, but have to really be realistic about having to adjust the goal, because knowing that there is a lot on our teachers right now, and that's not including all the other things they're dealing with in terms of children needs and et cetera, et cetera.
So that I appreciate that question, because often in the Office of Academics, right, that is what is at the center of our conversations, right? We know where we are, and we know that we have to get to hit these very ambitious targets that we have laid out for ourselves. And again, it's for the benefit again of our students, right? And we wrestle with the realities right now. And I would say that I continue to tell my team, right, we're going to continue to be ambitious with those targets, right? But I want to make sure that we're doing a very good job of tracking, right, everything that is happening and every little move where we have to shift, because at the end of the day, we want to continue to talk about those targets. We want to continue to talk about whether we're getting closer or not to those targets, but be very real about what is happening along the way. So although I believe the easiest thing would be to say, hey, like, then why are we like putting the stress on ourselves, and let's just reduce those targets? I think I would be the first one as the chief of academic to say, we also don't want to do that, because we want to continue to push ourselves, because we are way behind. Our kids are way behind when we even compare, right, across similar districts. So I think we need to keep those just to kind of continue to push ourselves, right, as we balance out also the realities, understanding that we hope that if at the end of the day, right, at the end of the day, when Mario and I come back and say, oh my God, like we didn't hit the target, we missed the target, we rather say, hey, we missed the target, but this is everything that we did. This is where we were able to move the needle. And these were some of the challenges that maybe were some of the factors of why we didn't hit that target. So I think we don't want to be too fast and kind of saying, okay, let's chop down those percentages, right? But I do appreciate it, and we do need to continue to discuss that because it is a reality. Mario, I don't know if you want to add anything else, but
yeah, just because I remember when we were setting the targets in the discussion we had. So the 27% of eighth graders being at grade level, that goal was set on 100% of current eighth graders meeting 100% of their growth target. The last year that we had eighth grade, which was what, 2019, we had 40% of our students, we had an average, the average of their growth target achieved was 40%. So we're shooting for 100% of students meeting 100% of the growth target. So yes, that's overly ambitious based off of both district and state historical data. But when Dr. Negron and I were talking about it, we're like, but how do we shoot for less? Like, how do we set a goal and say, oh, only 70% of our students will reach their goal. So it didn't, when we were setting the goal, I remember it didn't feel right not to set a goal that was inclusive of every child meeting their growth target. So yes, it's ambitious, and I know this is being live streamed, but like very hard to possibly reach. But how do you not set a goal that is inclusive of every kid reaching their target?
Yeah, I appreciate those responses. It just also makes me think about our role as board members too, right? In terms of, we do have a significant portion that we're investing in teaching and learning, but just knowing that that's the core of what our school district does, and just thinking about the word resources and how balancing that and other type of resources that whether it's our teachers, our coaches, your team, Mario, et cetera, like need in order to balance this, because you also need time to be able to utilize these resources and actually build those action plans, et cetera. So Ms. Brody, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, thank you. So I have a few questions here. So so I'm trying to visualize the presentations. I appreciate all of the information that was presented today. So is it fair to say the information, who is translating this so that teachers have a clear, or what are they tapping into to help them with instruction based on what we were presented with today? Is that like through the, yeah.
I so appreciate your question. And Mario, I think you would agree with me. This is why having the support of those coaches in buildings is so crucial, right? Because often, whether it be when they're meeting with a whole grade level to like unpack, hey, where did the kids perform, right? Where are the strengths? Where are the opportunities? Let's really think about what is our planning looking like, right? That level of support, I mean, that is huge. Because if you think about it, if you don't have that and you're just expecting to get that from the building leader, which, yeah, you should too, right? The reality is the building leader with a million things that are happening, right? They're not going to be able to have all of that time to be able to be supporting you along the way at the level of depth that a coach will be able to do. So that is why Mario and I both agree, like we 100% believe in coaching and how that is such an important investment, right? But I think that is number one. Second is when we are able to have them for professional learning, right? So when we're running district level professional learning, that is when Mario is being intentional about what is actually going to happen during this particular session, right? And based on where we are at the moment and the strategies that are laid out for the year, that's where he continues to have an opportunity to continue to message and make sure that people are like unpacking all of those resources, learning how to leverage them all, right? So I would say coaching, professional learning time, those become key to this work.
Okay, thank you. So I have 3 more questions. So intercession you mentioned, but next to intercession, I saw summer. So is some other intercession other than summer?
So we will have, there's the intercession for February, and then there's the intercession in April. So the one in February will be specific to math. The one in April will be specific to literacy. And then, of course, in the summer, through the work that we do, whether it be in Early Start, whether it be in our high school transition program, right? All of the pieces that Mario was speaking about in terms of the getting to see into those mastery assessments and start there to have the kids move forward, all of that comes into summer work. That's usually the type of curriculum that is utilized during summer.
Okay, so 2 more. Intervene, they have started with our students.
So Intervene right now, in terms of the high dosage, we have some students right now that are getting ready to go with the parental engagement, and they're going to be ready to go. We're also starting, I think it's next week, to kind of draw like more interest from all the outreach to say almost like a drop-in so that people get more comfortable with what it is and parents gain more familiarity. So that then when we get to the parent-teacher conference in February, to kind of say, hey, what has been your experience like? Can we lock you in? So we're using all kinds of strategies, right? To continue to do our high dosage tutoring. Also, the K2 is also launching, I believe next week, because we hired staff. I believe we already onboarded them. And so basically both tracks are going to go at the same time.
Okay, so along the Intervene, what are they tapping in? Because I know at our meetings, at our board meetings, we discussed maybe they're doing like it wasn't determined whether they're going to do an assessment. We are, but we're going to find out where the student is. Are they going to be tapping into any of what one of our investments is Zearn? Are they going to be tapping into any of that to know like the support our students need? Or are we just going to use the assessment going in to lead the tutoring that's going to happen?
So basically what happened in that space of the work is I had Kaylin Jacobs, who is my lead for extended learning opportunities, and also Erin Doyle, who is our MTSS coordinator, right? And also in consultation with like Mario and Michelle in mathematics, triangulating all of our data that was available to then identify, right, the students. Because remember, we were aiming for students that were in what we call the tier 2 and the tier 3. So that was all of the data. So when Mario talks about the data that the kids would have used right now, that gets pulled in. And that's what, I don't want to say shared because we don't give, so I'm gonna have to be very careful with what we're sharing with them, because at the end of the day, they're not HPS, right? So that is how we tackle that particular piece, so that they would at least have some information to get the kids rolling. And then remember that we said that once they're in there, what we want to do is use some of their reports, right, to then be able to provide that data back to not only the family, but also the classroom teacher, so that we will know how the students are progressing.
Okay, and another question I have is, at this point, we're in January. So for parents who have a student that is in need of support, like it is clear, at this point, what should the parent be experiencing? Well, let's say the student, because the parent is just gonna, for the most part, be told like, this is what we're doing, you know, with your child. But what should a student who needs support, at what point should they be in January?
Ms. Brody, can you go a little further into that? I want to make sure that I'm
Okay,
fully understanding your question.
Okay, no problem. So we have assessments that students are given.
Mhm.
It's clear the student is in need of some additional support. So I know it probably depends. So we're going to say a student who, say if a student is a couple grade levels behind, and yeah. So what, at this point, what should the student, I mean, you could just give a typical example, and even name if a student is struggling in this, like just give an example of what support, like how, like as a parent, how would we think, oh, this is what happens when a student is identified. There are a couple, when I say identified, just based on the assessments, they're behind, and something needs to happen for them to get where they need to be.
So I think that's where it comes into what Mario was sharing earlier about those moves that are happening within the classroom as the teachers are assessing the data, right? To make sure that they're continuing to go back and support with that particular skill, right? That they may be lacking. In addition to that, that is where our tier 2, right, interventions would kick in. So those would be students that you would see in some of those tier 2 opportunities. Some at the high school level, like Mario mentioned earlier, but also at the elementary level. That is where, in relationship to our MTSS work, that's where those students would have been flagged to then be able to access the tier 2 supports. They're also, right, getting a little challenging too. I want to name it because remember, that was a strategy where we invested in our resource teachers, right? Specifically to be able to support us with that work. And that has been work also that has been impacted because of the staffing shortages, right? That we saw in some buildings, I would say it's probably going better than in some other areas. Like right now, I know that overall, when we look at the whole district as a whole, our elementaries are in a much better place. If you were to compare them, for example, to our middle school and even our high schools, even in terms of that process of the kids accessing those tier 2 interventions. But that would be what would happen. So both in the instructional moves that a teacher's making at the classroom level, and also what's happening holistically to identify those students for the tier 2. And then outside of that, what we are doing then more at the district level in flagging those students for all of these additional supports that we have, right? Such as intercession or high dosage tutoring. So we started, right? The kids who have been identified and that will be like invited, right, to intercession, it's going to be very strategic, right? Because we looked at the data, particularly in grades 3 and in grade 8, just in math, to really say, hey, who are the kids, right, that like ready can optimize this support that will be offered in these 4 days, intense support come 3rd week in February. So those will be like the students and the families that will probably be like receive some communication that says like, we really want you to come and participate in our intercession. Sorry, that was a little long-winded.
Nope, I appreciate it. Ms. Oliver, that's it for me.
All right, well, I don't have any further questions. Just want to check in, Dr. Negron, with you, and also I see Chief Avila on the call as well. Just want to check in if there's any other business before we close.
So we did not have anything else. It was, Mario, you should feel really good. The whole thing was dedicated to math. We didn't share the time with anybody else. So you should be feeling the love. No, but this was that we had for today. We really wanted just to hone in on where we are and what we're doing in math.
That's great. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for the full team. That was great information. Again, as a reminder, the presentation is available on Board Docs. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Continue to please stay safe between COVID and now the weather. Just please take care of yourselves. And I wish everyone a happy Three Kings Day. Take care, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.